Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Barry. Great to be with you.
Is everything okay between Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey?
One big bear hug. One big bear hug. I didn't see Joe Hockey turning his back on Tony Abbott after he'd given his budget and reply. It's a very happy and strong team.
But why wouldn't Tony Abbott anyway leave him swinging in the breeze over the family trust issue? Because there's not a lot of support for it, is there?
Well, I just think the whole thing's a big beat-up, Barry. I mean, no one was privy to that conversation. They're part of this interview or part of the panel, and I think it's just a big beat-up and there's just simply nothing to see.
Was there a bit of concern when Joe Hockey described the global financial crisis as a hiccup?
No, look, I think Joe's doing a very strong job in the Treasury portfolio because in the budget of the week or so ago, Joe made two very important points, and that is Australian families and small business are going to be paying for the government's budget blowouts. Now, that message has resonated all around the country, and that's Joe's job, and I think he's made that point very clearly.
Well, what about Malcolm Turnbull? Is he being helpful on climate change?
Well, look, we've got talent all over our front bench, and I think, between Malcolm and Joe and the, cast of others, I mean, Tony has a very strong team that's working very closely together. Malcolm's making his contribution in communications, Joe in Treasury, and the rest of us are seeking to do our jobs as well, and effectively.
But he made a contribution on climate change as well, and when he said he didn't want to comment on Tony Abbott's direct action policy, but I'm happy to describe it to you, he was really saying, I'll describe it, but I won't defend it.
Well, we all have our own portfolio responsibilities. I mean, I don't talk too much outside my portfolio either. And Malcolm's got a long track record on this issue. Everybody knows that. And he's respected for his views on that amongst those who share his views. And I don't think there's anything extraordinary about that. I mean, Malcolm's been candid and honest about where he sees things, and that's certainly consistent with his track record.
So he should work harder at sticking to his own portfolio?
Look, we all work hard on our own portfolios and holding the government account at each of those, and there's no shortage of things clearly that Malcolm's exposed in the communications area. I mean, the set-top box thing is a national joke. It's a national joke, and the budget's not even 2 weeks old.
When he said, though, that if the coalition under its direct action plan was to meet modest requirements on emissions reductions, that the policy would cost taxpayers $18 billion a year by mid-century. Is that figure accurate?
Well, let's come back to the carbon tax. The carbon tax is going to cost 14 times per year what our direct action plan is going to cost in terms of the revenue received from the carbon tax. The policy is focused on achieving our 5% reductions by 2020. Both the government and the opposition have policies to meet those, and that's what the debate's about. The government wants to have a carbon tax. We disagree, and so do the vast majority of Australians. And more so, we think if the government wants to put in a carbon tax, then they must do as John Howard did with the GST and take it to election. And I noticed the vast majority of Queenslanders support that view as well this morning.
So $18 billion a year, if that's what it was, that wouldn't be a remarkably high figure.
Well, those are figures that are being speculated well beyond the debate we're having today, and they're not the subject of the debate we're having today. The debate we're having today is, should there be a carbon tax? The coalition says no, and the government says yes. But more so, the government said there wouldn't be one before the last election, and now she wants to put one in. And that is the issue before the government today, and it's about political integrity.
OK, we'll go back to your portfolio now. And if you were seeking asylum, why would you now take a dangerous boat ride just to end up at the back of a queue in Malaysia?
Well, the situation at the moment, Barry, is not that at all, because there's no one who will be going to Malaysia until any agreement is finalised. Now, that was made clear by the Malaysian minister, and it's been made clear by our minister himself when he announced the package. So the suggestion that anyone who arrives at the moment, before any deal is concluded, is going to Malaysia is plainly false.
But we know they'll end up somewhere in a third country. They're making that perfectly clear. So why would people...
How do we know that? How do we know? There's no deal with PNG, there's no deal with East Timor, there's no deal with Thailand, there's not even a deal with Malaysia. They have no deal with anybody at the moment. So I don't know how the minister can be so bold in that presumption, unless he's going to take up our plan for Nauru, who I know will take them because I spoke to them this week.
So you're saying you don't believe that they'll ever do a deal with Malaysia? When the likelihood is they'll stitch it up in a week or two.
Well, we don't know, Barry, and that's the point. The government has rushed out and made this announcement, and the details are still unclear. I mean, has the minister made a declaration that Malaysia is a specified country under Section 198A of the Migration Act? Now, that's what he has to do that. Now, in order to do that, he has to satisfy that people who go to Malaysia will have protection until their cases are assessed, and if they're refugees, they're looked after. Now, I look forward to his explanation as to how those conditions will be satisfied.
But even so, even the prospect of this happening is having an impact already, anecdotally. The Sydney Morning Herald, they spoke to asylum seekers in Indonesia, and everybody they spoke to said the same thing. They know of the policy and they won't now attempt the crossing.
Well, look, history will judge this measure, Barry, but what also it will judge is the mess we've had over the last 3 years. Now, today, as you know, I've called for an inquiry into the immigration detention network for the simple reason that we have critical incidents occurring on an average of more than 3 times a day. We've got a record population now detention. The number of processing times has tripled, and all of this has created havoc and riots and chaos. Now, that is the sheer result of this government refusing to acknowledge their culpability in their border protection failures for the last 3 years. So the mess is there for everyone to see, and it's time for us to take a good look at it.
But surely you don't expect the Greens to support that. They will see it, won't they, as you just looking for more headlines?
Well, why would the Greens oppose an inquiry that looks into things like the compliance with the immigration detention values of this government, or how people are treated in detention? Now, I've forwarded the terms of reference to the Greens and the Independents, and I look forward to having a constructive discussion with them this week, because our detention network is in complete chaos, and people are suffering as a result, and the budget's suffering. I mean, a 1.75 billion alone on asylum seeker costs in 1 year shows that this is completely out of control.
OK, I want to take you back again to what those asylum seekers have told the Sydney Morning Herald, that they know of the policy and they won't now attempt the crossing. That surely has to be a good thing.
Well, we all want to see the boat stop, Barry. I mean, the government has been dragged kicking and screaming to this point.
Doesn't this indicate they might be on the right track?
Well, we'll wait and see, Barry. I mean, history will judge that. I mean, it's been 2 weeks. I mean, the Coalition had 6 years of virtually no boats arriving, and people still claim that our policies didn't work. But anyway, look, we'll see what happens. But the point about this issue is the government had to be dragged kicking and screaming. I mean, the Coalition has been on the government's case about this for years, and finally they've admitted that it's their policies that caused this chaos and caused the boats to come to Australia. So if these policies work, we'll see. But let's not forget they're the ones who started the boats.
But you say we'll see. I mean, if you genuinely want to stop, and you want to stop the boats, and you read that sort of thing, that's evidence on the ground, not politicians talking, then you'd be quite pleased with that outcome.
Well, we'll see, Barry. That's my point. We'll wait and see. We want to see the boat stop, and if the boat stop, no one will be happier than I, because that's what I've been campaigning for. But it doesn't remove the chaos that is occurring in our detention system and the legacy of this government's failed policies. It's taken them 3 years to get to this point, and that is an absolute disgrace.
And what you've also been campaigning for was a very similar policy to what the government has come up with the Malaysian solution, because you did say in a speech in November you advocated taking more refugees out of the camps in return for those who try to enter illegally. That's the Malaysian solution.
No, it's not. The Malaysian solution is a 5-for-1 swap, Barry. I advocated a 1-for-1 swap in that speech, and I don't have an issue with a swap, but the swap has to be on Australia's terms and in Australia's interests. And I think this has been a very poorly negotiated deal and a very desperate deal by this government. And the fact they rushed it out before that actually concluded it, I think was very reckless and to send a confusing message into the region, because, as I said before, no one who turns up before this agreement is concluded, and we don't know how long that will be going to Malaysia.
So your problem is with the numbers, but Australians haven't got problems with taking refugees. What's behind this?
No, neither do I.
No, you want to stop the boats.
Yes.
So why then are suddenly the numbers are the concern?
Well, we think a 5-for-1 swap, Barry, where the Australian government pays for everything, is not a good deal for Australia. I mean, our view is it should have been a 1-for-1, and apparently that was the government's view when they first started these negotiations, and because of their desperately weak position, they got cranked up for 5-for-1.
But there's nothing in it for Malaysia. A 1-for-1, there's nothing in that for Malaysia. You have to offer Malaysia something to get them to sign up.
Well, I disagree that there's nothing in that for Malaysia, because taking genuine refugees out of Malaysia into Australia is something that we've done for many years. I mean, 340 were taken out of Malaysia last year in 2009-10. There was only a total of 1,059 applications out of Malaysia. So we're now going to be taking more out of Malaysia than there even were applications. Now, I don't have a problem necessarily with that, but that can be done within the existing quota. There was nothing stopping us taking more refugees out of Malaysia prior to this agreement. Nothing stopping us at all. It could be done within the existing framework.
Now, even before this, the number of boat people arriving in Australia in the first quarter of this year is half that of the same quarter of last year. Now, is that a good result to be welcomed?
Well, it's double the amount that occurred in the last 6 years of the coalition government, and we had a very bad summer of weather, Barry. And I don't think we should be claiming the weather as a policy deterrent.
So do you think that's what impacted on the quarter-by-quarter comparison, was the weather?
Well, I think particularly over the summer that we do know the weather was quite difficult this year, and sadly we know that the tragic incident of last December was during that period of time, and equally there was that other vessel which we now don't know what happened to it, the 91 people who left in November, and we don't know where that boat is now. That's another 91 souls we fear have perished, and at the end of the day that's what this issue was fundamentally about. So that no one will be happier than me, Barry, if the boats stop, and Tony Abbott, but we still have to ensure we have an ongoing border protection mechanism and a detention network that isn't in a rolling crisis that we have today.
Okay, we've got an item coming up now on plain paper packaging on cigarettes. Are you going to back the cigarette companies in the fight against the government on this policy?
Well, again, that's a matter for Tony and for Peter Dutton, and I'm happy for them to put the coalition's position on this, Barry.
And what's your view on it?
Oh, well, I'll be supporting the coalition's position on it.
Okay, and is the Liberal Party going to continue to take donations from the cigarette companies?
Well, these are legal companies, and unless the government is making these companies illegal, then it's a free country, Barry.
So the Labor Party were mugs to reject this money?
Well, political parties make their own decisions, but there are companies all around the country who want to make donations. That's their democratic right in a free country like Australia.
Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Barry. Good to be with you.